Hey, hi.
Hey,
Before I
hey, we
launch,
get to see you this weekend.
yes, I know. It's very exciting. Everybody here is all of Twitter. Before I get into my question, Lolly, just to let you know that the that tonic really worked for me, and so did the apple slice. So I highly recommend that. That really helped me a lot with those issues in the evening, and then even as I went to sleep. So, um, and also the tonic works really nicely to make a little ginger ale. You just put it in a little club soda or
Oh,
something, and
yeah,
it
there
nice
you
little
go.
like ginger ale kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I
Oh,
recommend.
thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, my question this evening, Greg, is about I'm not sure if it's a pulmonary thing or a
Okay,
respiratory thing or a nasal thing, but
okay.
I'm getting really tired of having these episodes that where it's like I go to breathe in and suddenly there's just not enough air and I have to cough. It's just a little, it's like, oh, okay, there wasn't quite enough air. And I don't know what this is or why it comes and goes, but it's really annoying.
So, do you feel like you're taking a big, long, slow, deep breath, or as soon as you start to inhale, you start to have a little bit of a cough?
Um, if I'm really mindful about my breathing, it's not a problem. But if I'm just like engaged in doing something or talking to somebody or working and I'm not consciously taking a nice, long, slow, deep breath, it'll happen. It'll just like, oh, suddenly there's just not enough air.
Yeah, so I think that is probably, it is kind of like a respiratory issue, but it's probably more like the trachea, like
Mm,
windpipe,
hmm
and that combined with the diaphragm. And so I would file this under a thing called they call it aerophagy or aerophagy, something like that. And it basically is like the breath is a little bit off and there's a little bit of like tension in the trachea,
hmm
and it can manifest as like tension in the diaphragm, like the diaphragm is not contracting and relaxing quite like it should, which I could say that just about anybody, but it's like it's to the point where it's starting to cause a little bit of disruption in the breath and something. And so I would use you could use anise, you could use
hmm
fennel, you could use there's an oil called C. odorata,
Okay.
and it's basically a kind of cumin. Like it smells like Mexican food, like good like spicy Mexican food. It's but usually I use anise or fennel. Like those are usually the ones that get it. Um, there was another. I made a blend for that.
You literally have a blend called
Called
Aerophagy.
Aerophagy. Yeah,
I typed in how to spell it.
yeah. Let me look something up about that, because it's got a couple of oils that I never think about for that. And that is probably, let's see, it's in that. Oh, I remember now. Caraway. I knew there was one. I was like, there's one that man, I was on a caraway kick there for a while. And
Oh,
because like that's the thing is it does throw your breath off enough to where like your normal like inhalation, exhalation, you'll find that like your rhythm kind of gets thrown off a little bit, and then every once in a while it's like you'll gulp air, like you'll be
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and it could be like when you're talking or like when you're kind of doing something active, or even when you're eating, you'll start like kind of gulping air, and it's just this like weird tension in the trachea and stuff. And so, you know, in the US, we don't talk about aerophagy very much, but that is very much a European thing. Like they acknowledge it or are aware of it. And you know, doctors are usually looking for it. And so, you know, it could be a byproduct of like allergies, it could be a byproduct of stress, could be a byproduct of like being sick and then getting better, but like your respiratory system just never completely recovered. Like you might have some spasms or like a fascial lesion somewhere that's throwing something off. And so I usually start with the aerophagy or caraway, anise, fennel, you know, something of that nature. And then if there's still like a little bit of something off there is I still use that, and I usually just take it internal. Like you can inhale it, but usually I don't use anise too much as an inhalation for respiratory stuff unless it's like a little baby or child or something. Like I'll have them do it. And you know, just because it's also balancing to the nervous system. But you know, here it's a kind of there's like a glitch in the nervous system, and there's like a kind of spasm, but it's in smooth muscle. And
Mhm.
so sometimes, like especially if the person has been sick, I'll use that for a little bit, and then I have them, if it doesn't resolve, I'll have them inhale helichrysum just in case there's like a fascial lesion, or you know what people would call scar tissue or something. And it's like a knot in the smooth muscle. You know, there's not really a term for it. They call it lesions usually in osteopathic practices. And so it's a way to kind of unwind that. Um, the other byproduct of that is it, because that is present, you know, we go back to like what we were talking about in that vibrational healing class, where like sometimes our body starts to go into like I just coined this term, or say it like this for the sake of my notes and stuff, is I refer to it as metabolic instability, where things just start getting a little wonky, and it just starts these like little chain events to happen. And so because it's the breath, and because it's not always necessarily the bronchioles, it's like that trachea, and it does impact the diaphragm. Um, sometimes like using large body tonic, you know, or just large oil, like, and just put it on the body, you know,
Mm.
because it calms and relaxes the bronchioles, but it also does things to the nervous system. So that's one thing that possibly could be a thing that you experiment with. But a lot of times what I like to use is, you know, I put the anise or the caraway, fennel, something in motion. Then I kind of touch it up with helichrysum after a few days. And then if that's still not doing it, I will have the person or myself um, take yarrow internally. And the idea being that when the breath starts getting wonky like that, it starts to cause like processes in your body to start getting triggered. Like it causes like a kind of agitation in the nervous system and a little bit in the immune system. Like not a lot, but like it's like something's there. You know,
I've been noticing suddenly like weird spikes in my heart rate.
yeah, that perfect example. Like you
Okay.
got it right there. Yeah.
Okay.
And so like with that, um the yarrow will usually calm that down, you know.
So I have this spagyric yarrow
Yeah,
tincture.
perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the one that I use. Like if I'm traveling, I'll use the oil, but if I'm home, I usually use the tincture. And
Okay.
you know, because the tincture's got the oil in it as well. And so you get the tincture extraction and the essential oil at the same time. And so it's a little bit broader spectrum. And a lot of times within a day or two of doing that combo, it will calm down. But like I use it almost as like a canary in a coal mine. You know, like if I don't address that, it's not going to happen quickly. It'll happen little bit by little bit by little bit, but feeling crappy is common. You know what I mean? Like it might take 6 months, it might take a year. Like it sometimes it's just you're if the breath gets thrown off, and then it starts to throw off the nervous system, and
Yeah.
then eventually starts to throw off your sleep, and then like you said, you start having weird spikes in the heart rate, and all these things start to happen. And if you don't really kind of jump on top of it, at some point you just kind of start feeling a little bit worse and a little bit worse, and then pretty soon you're in the middle of like, I don't feel good. And it's not like you have a health condition, you have like a functional issue, like a functional condition, but eventually some health issue is going to pop out of that. And so, it's usually not anything bad or chronic, but it's just wherever the body has a weakness is usually where it will kind of settle in. And
Yeah, it's just incredibly annoying because it
yeah,
comes
oh
and
yeah, I
goes. I'm
agree.
happy to say it's like, and then when it's gone, it's like, yay, I feel so good, and then
Right,
it pops back up again. And it's like, why? Why
right.
does it keep popping
Yeah,
back up?
yeah. I've seen it like with people after they've had surgeries and, after like a traumatic event, but also just like colds, flus, COVID, um, some of what people call long COVID, it's not the same from person to person, but it's still like because it hits the respiratory system so hard, it does like weird things to the blood and it does weird things to the nervous system. And, you know, going back to the anabolic state and the catabolic state, your body just starts kind of degenerating. And I would say, like looking at all the things that happened with COVID through all that time, that idea of usually when I'd really delve deep into like reducing that catabolic state, that state of degeneration, was usually injury or trauma related. Like, I'd always keep it in mind when I was treating people or whatever. But like when like a whiplash or a fall or a big traumatic event or some big emotional event, that's when I'd go, okay, we got to make sure the catabolic state is diminished and all that kind of stuff. But the thing with watching people go through COVID and then how people were responding and then sometimes not responding. One of the things that COVID really kind of blew my mind about was that how badly that in some people, not all people, but in some people, it really put the pedal to the metal on that state of degeneration where even after they came out of it, their body just kept like going downhill.
Mm.
And you know, you could see that in really severe, like as far as immune system related issues, you would see that in really severe like chemical exposures or really super bad allergic reactions to something. Like somebody needed to have like an EpiPen or some weird thing like that. um, um, like I was treating these children one time that all had a bad reaction to the vaccines, like when they were little kids,
Mm.
and they would have like seizure disorders and like they basically would have like brain damage because of they had such a bad allergic reaction. And so that's what we would try to do is like try to decrease the state of degeneration. And you know it wasn't always successful. Like we would try, but sometimes just there was already too much brain damage and stuff. And
Yeah.
so you know in the extreme, I was always like, oh yeah, that's a thing. But who would think about it like from a cold or a flu? Like
Mm.
that's usually not that big of a, like, you know, for some people that might be a little bit of a thing, but not for 50 or 60% of the people who get sick. Like that's usually like a more isolated or like specialized situation. But man,
Yeah.
that virus really was an eye opener. You know,
Mm.
and back in the, you know, I know there's a lot of talk about the different reasons like why it happened or if it was, you know, man-made or whatever, but back in early 2000, like 2001, 2002, 3, Master Toa had me and a small group of people looking at, you know, we were doing these like little research projects where we would present information to him. And one of the things he had us looking at was solar flare activity. And one of the big things with solar flare activity is that um, it makes viruses and bacterias mutate at a much more rapid rate.
Mm.
And you know, in people, it affects the RNA, but the big concern always was viruses and bacterias. Like you know, fungus a little bit too, but it was mostly viruses and bacterias. And you know, we were looking at the sun cycles and knowing that the sun cycles were going to get a little bit worse before they got better. And the the timing of it was kind of hand in hand with the solar flare activity. And
Wow.
so, you know, hard to say. You know, it's hard to say, but you know, I know this biochemist that you know is also into medical aromatherapy, and he just like even back in 2005, 4 in that area, he was like, the future is viruses. We got to get better at treating viruses. I mean, he was just always, every time I saw him, we got to get better at viruses. We just, everything we can do about viruses. Like he was just, man, he had viruses on the brain. And I was, every time I would see him, I was like, that's a little weird, you know, that like he's that fixated and, you know, he's a smart enough guy and a practical guy. I was like, why is he like so fixated on that? And so one time I asked him and he's like, I don't know, but it's just, he goes, when I go to bed, it's on my mind. When I wake up, it's on my mind. And as time went by, I was like, I get it. You know, I get it. Like, I get why he was so obsessed with it. And, you know, he's still a little obsessed with it. And, but when I say obsessed, like in a good way, like, you know, how you, when you're like a dog with a bone, you know, you got something, but you don't know what it is. And he was just, because I would say the big thing with viruses is there's the viral component and the infection component, but it really wreaks havoc on your body. And it's really about cleaning up the aftermath because it's like it goes through and just flicks these switches in your body. And sometimes after you get done with the infection, the switches don't always automatically go back. And so, you know, that same idea, they started looking at using viruses to manipulate the body to treat like health issues. And there was a physician that started with infecting people that had AIDS. He would infect people with a different virus. He did with AIDS and he did with cancer. And he had a crazy high success rate, like a crazy high success rate. But it wasn't FDA approved. And so he had to take it out of country. And I never really heard what happened to him after that. But that it's that same idea. He was like, we spend so much time fighting the viruses. Why not make them our ally? Why not like use them? If we study them, we can use them to flick switches in the body for health issues. And I was like, that's actually brilliant. But
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know enough about it to do what he was talking about, but I mean, a brilliant idea, worth examining, you know. But a lot of times it's like after we get off the virus, if you really boil it down, You look at that, putting things back into a state of regeneration, diminishing the degeneration in the body. You look at the thalamic tract, you look at the, of the spine, you look at is there a metabolic instability? You balance out the nervous system. Is there a bunch of homeostatic emotions? I would say some of the things that were happening with COVID was also like the effects of the virus, like after the fact, like not so much when the people were having infection, but there was a lot of emotion charged around on that on all sides, you know what I mean? And I don't know how much of that was, I mean, there was obviously the social stuff, but I think some of the effects of the virus also impacted that homeostatic emotion, generation in the body that, we talk about a shift in a spiritual practice, but the the earth is we're changing in age, we're changing, we're going through a kind of change, and you can see that again going back to what Master Choa had me and a handful of people doing, was the other thing that he was looking at with the solar flares is he wanted us to monitor and watch animal behavior. And he said, look for variations and new behaviors in groups of animals. And about the time that all the viruses stuff started really getting wonky, there was changes in animal behavior. Solitary hunting animals were hunting in a pack now, and some of them even started like using, I don't want to say tools, but they were doing things in different ways. They were basically changing their behavior. And even if you look at like there's all that activity with the orcas, like taking down those sailboats and things, and it's still happening. It's things are shifting in the world, and we just got to get good at handling the basics, not taking for granted that just everything is like normal and we're just dealing with a fluctuation. Like there's times where you got to make sure the nervous system is balanced, you got to make sure that the body is regenerating, you got to you just hit those like kind of markers with whatever's going on, and you're more likely to not get impacted by the weird chaos either in the environment or the viruses or the bacterias or whatever it is. And so if that you're having this like aerophagy thing, I mean, I'd go deep with it, because I mean that is another byproduct of potentially having that metabolic instability. And it's not like it's a 911. It's not like even over 3 months it's probably going to do something, but over a couple of years it would do something. And so the more that you can kind of calm it down and keep it calm, and it still will flare up in anybody from time to time, but the more you kind of stay on top of it and kind of be watching it, you can use it as an indicator of the body's getting a little chaotic or a little agitated. And I mean, basically, you can slow down the aging process by monitoring stuff like that.
Okay, well, I
Yeah.
will. I will. I don't particularly want to slow down the aging process, but that's okay.
Right. Well, the aging process just being the body breaking down, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The aging process really is inflammation.
Mm,
You're calming down the inflammatory processes, because on one level we have like inflammation, but as we get older we start to develop a kind of systemic inflammation that just starts making everything stiff and everything break down and the organs not functioning as well, and so just ways in keeping that down.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. We look
You're
forward
so
to seeing you soon.
yes.